I also believe that the DOJ, it seemed like this was a bit surprising to them and they weren't aware that Hunter would change his plea. Do you think that at all affects this case?
Well, so Mr. Biden is represented by some of the best attorneys in the country, and they likely had their own reasons for presenting this proposed disposition without consulting the government. In my experience, oftentimes, in fact, almost all the time, um, defense counsel is in touch with the government prosecutors about potential guilty pleas, whether that's part of a plea agreement with the government or whether the defendant chooses to plead guilty without entering into an agreement with the government. So it is unusual for a defendant to announce at basically on the eve of trial that he or she wishes to plead guilty without having run that by the government. Now, of course, Mr. Biden's attorneys did not have to alert the government that he intended to enter an Alford plea, but in my experience, generally there is that communication with the government, and I am somewhat surprised that the government indicated they had
Hmm.
not heard of this until the parties were in court this morning.
Right. Is there any involvement required from Attorney General Merrick Garland? Does he have to approve the deal, or what would his role be in this process?
I don't have any specific knowledge of the internal protocols at the Department of
Mhm.
Justice when it comes to whether or not the Attorney General himself has to approve a deal. I would imagine, and I'm speculating here, that considering the high profile nature of this case, that there are some additional steps that the Department of Justice might go through. But at the same time, my understanding is that Attorney General Garland does take pains to remove himself from any actions that might be considered political, which is why I believe that there was a special prosecutor appointed in this case in the first place. So I'm not exactly sure how involved Attorney General Garland would be, but I can be fairly certain that whatever steps he does or does not take, he's doing it deliberately to make sure that there is no appearance of impropriety or political pressure or political considerations at all. And I would imagine that Attorney General Garland is making sure that there are no political considerations here. And I think that that is an important part of the Justice Department and of prosecutors in this country, is to make sure that every person is treated equally under the law. And at least that was the attempt, I believe, and the hope of Attorney General Garland, I would think, in appointing a special prosecutor in the first place, so that it didn't seem as if Attorney General Garland was somehow putting his finger on the scale.